wellness revolution starts now.
Welcome to our program. I'm Dr. Steve Hotze. I believe that you need to have a provider, physician, staff of professionals who can coach you on the path of health and wellness naturally. So as you mature, you've got energy, vitality, and enthusiasm for life. I'm visiting with our new physician's assistant, Jason Gorliss, who has brought several different treatment modalities with him to our practice when he joined. One of them was his experience with dental hygiene and understanding the importance of dental hygiene. Although he's not a dentist, he became interested in that and work that was done exposing the dangers of root canals and mercury amalgams and periodontal disease and how that can have an adverse effect on your overall health. He also brings to our practice a new treatment modality, a neurofeedback. Passive neurofeedback, and it's called IASIS, which in Greek term for healing. And he's offering this, and he's offering this to our guests. And Jason, why don't you explain to us what IASIS? By the way, that's spelled IASIS. Why don't you explain to us exactly what IASIS therapy is and what it's used for?
Okay. So I call it IASIS, but IASIS actually sort of makes a little bit of sense because it sort of rhymes with oasis. And when you think about oasis, right, it's a place where you go for rest, rejuvenation, and for healing. And so it makes perfect sense that people would call it IASIS. But it's a type of neurofeedback. And if you were to understand neurofeedback, it's helpful to understand biofeedback. And so biofeedback is a modality by which we take data from the body, whether it's your respiratory rate, your heart rate, your muscle tension, heart rate variability. You take that information and you give it back to the body so that it can make changes in its own physiology. And so that's the feedback part. When you think about neurofeedback, the root word neuro comes from brain or neurology. And so this is a brain-based type of biofeedback. It is a little bit different than typical neurofeedback. When you think about neurofeedback, it's based on operant conditioning. You're exposing your brain to some sort of information, and then the brain takes that and applies that in changing brain waves. And so brain-based neurofeedback is really helpful for things like depression, anxiety, insomnia, focus disorders like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Well, a lot of people can't even sit still for that. And so it can take 40, 60 sessions to see significant benefit from conventional neurofeedback.
How does conventional neurofeedback function or operate the treatment system compared to IASIS?
So conventional neurofeedback measures your brain waves through EEG, so that's electrical activity of your brain, and it routes it through a device, whether it's like a television screen that plays a movie or it's a video game. And when your brain is doing what the operator would like for it to do, like make more alpha waves, which are important for focusing, then the video game is operating or the volume on the movie is high. And so that gives that information to the brain. Now, IASIS is passive. It doesn't require action on the part of the patient at all. So we measure the EEG brain waves, and then there's a signal, electrical signal, that's sent back through those electrodes to those different parts of the brain that affect the change that we're looking for. So typically people who struggle from anxiety, depression, insomnia, a variety of other issues have they're stuck in certain brainwave patterns. Those brainwave patterns are disruptive, they're problematic, they engender issues with and mental health challenges. And so IASIS measures those brainwave patterns, sends an offset signal, an electrical signal back to the brain, gently moving them off of those stuck patterns and allowing the brain sort of to reboot it, if you will, like a computer does. You know, if your computer is frozen, it continues in that same loop and doesn't allow you to work effectively. This same thing sort of happens with your brain when you think about the same things over and over again. Like people with depression, they tend to think about the mistakes that they made in the past, and people with anxiety, they think about the future, which they really have no control over. And so they get stuck in these loops, these rumination loops, and that causes a lot of the dysfunction that they have. And so IASIS gently moves them off of those patterns, and through a variety of different mechanisms, like stimulating neurogenesis and synaptoplasticity. So we know, and we've learned recently, that the brain can actually make new neurons, certain aspects of the brain, those that are aspects that are involved in memory and cognition to a certain part, and the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain that is very important for driving our autonomic nervous system, which is either the rest and digest or the fight and flight or freeze. And so when you address the brain with these modalities, the brain really runs the show. Every other part of the body is sort of subservient to the brain. The brain, through the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, runs the endocrine system, which is your hormones, your thyroid, and things like that. Through a variety of different mechanisms, it drives and runs the immune system. There's actually something now that's been studied and come together called the psychoneuroendocrine immune supersystem. And so if you notice the top part of that system is the brain. So if the brain is dysregulated, everything else experiences dysregulation as a trickle-down effect. And so when we can help the brain to reboot and to regulate itself more appropriately through the development of new neurons, new connections, through the modulation of existing neurons and connections, the balancing of the autonomic nervous system through IASIS. And there's actually objective evidence that happens. So we've had people hooked up to devices that measure a parameter called heart rate variability, which is found to be probably the most impressive measure of autonomic nervous system function, as far as whether you're in the rest or digest and the fight or flight response. And as soon as that IASIS device is turned on, the heart rate variability goes up, which is indicative of a better balanced autonomic nervous system. And one of the things that we know also and learned recently is that the brain has a detoxification system called the lymphatic system. And sort of, you may pick up on the similarity with lymphatic, and that's the way that our body helps to detoxify the periphery. But the lymphatic system is actually more active when we're asleep. The brain shrinks by almost 60% when we're asleep, and that the glymph moves around, helping us to get rid of beta amyloid plaques that have been implicated in Alzheimer's disease and tau proteins and things like that. And so this device, like other devices that deliver transcranial electrical stimulation, which is really what it does, it's a sophisticated device that delivers something called LIPTUS, low intensity pulsed transcranial electrical stimulation. And through all the mechanisms that I just enumerated, helps with your brain regulation. And subsequent to that, all the trickle-down effect is beneficial for your immune system, for your hormonal system, for all those things that I mentioned.
Now, you've been involved with using IASIS for how long?
So currently about 3 years, but I actually, because of my real interest in this, I've done a lot of research, and I've become a trainer of the technology. And my wife and I were actually involved in rewriting the curriculum for the training around IASIS. And so we've been much more involved than just delivering the therapy.
And so we're now offering it here at Coach Health and Wellness Center. Now, how would someone know if they would benefit from this type of therapy?
Well, if you have a brain, you would benefit from this type of therapy. So it's not just for mental health challenges, but it's also for mental health optimization or cognitive optimization. So we've seen people benefit who ostensibly don't have any mental health or physical challenges, and that's really a rarity. People just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal, and so it's very hard to find somebody that's normal nowadays.
So you think anybody would benefit from this?
I would.
And how would you know? I mean, so you take the therapy. How many treatments would you have to have? Say somebody's got anxiety. Now we know that anxiety can be caused by several different reasons. One of which is hormonal, could cause anxiety. When women have when their hormones become imbalanced and premenstrually, they oftentimes become they get anxiety attacks, which are oftentimes simply relieved with natural progesterone, resolves that problem. So how normally if somebody's not feeling badly or they're not the ones that are likely to come in for getting help. Who are the people that routinely you would see? What type of issues would people have that they would be seeking help from IASIS from?
Right. So typically the folks that we see that derive the greatest benefit are those who have depression, anxiety, insomnia.
Can they be on all these pharmaceutical drugs at the same time and be treated? How does that work?
They can. Certainly, we would love to have a virgin brain, if you
Right.
will.
Sure.
But we've seen many people on those pharmaceutical agents get significant benefit and able to come off of those pharmaceutical agents. Now, we're not typically the ones that are going to facilitate that, but and I wouldn't ever encourage anybody to stop a medication without first consulting with the prescriber.
Right.
And a lot of these,
never stop an SSRI antidepressant cold because he can go crazier. I mean, you can go crazy on them, and you can go crazy if you stop them cold. So you don't want to do that. I recommend don't get started on them ever. They're knockoff. They're chemically have a very similar structure to cocaine. They're highly addictive. And if you stop them, what they do is they absolutely screw up your brain chemistry. That's what they're affecting. And there's no proof that they really elevate serotonin at all. There's no way to get in and measure the brain to do that. Most of the serotonin, as a matter of fact, which these are supposed to elevate serotonin, 90% of all the serotonin is made in your gut by bacteria in the gut. And so you got to have healthy gut flora to be healthy. So some of these people that are having problems with depression, you simply clean up their gut and they get healthy and they get over their depression or anxiety. So there's a lot of different modalities. And we don't recommend that, or I'm sure you probably wouldn't recommend if you have a problem if you have a problem with anxiety or depression, you need to come in not just for IASIS, but to be fully evaluated to see if we have hormonal problems. A low thyroid can cause depression, very commonly causes depression. And people that have gut disorders can have problem with depression because they've got yeast in their colon. They don't have enough good, healthy, normal bacterial flora, and the yeast produces toxins, and that makes them sick, and they don't feel well, and they're sick all the time. They get depressed. So you need a full evaluation to address underlying causes that may be the reason you've got some of your symptoms first. But as an added modality, we have IASIS. So first thing we do is make sure we don't have some other underlying medical problem that needs to be addressed. So we wouldn't say this is a panacea. I mean, no matter what your problem is, you wouldn't put somebody say, "Well, just do IASIS and everything will be well."
No, I wouldn't think that at all. And I think anything that you build on should start with a firm foundation.
Right.
That firm foundation should start with adequate sleep. Although you might have trouble with sleep, and that's where IASIS can help there. You should have a great nutritional foundation.
That's key.
You need to have physical activity, which also helps with depression and anxiety. And you also need to have some sort of stress mitigation practice because we all deal with it. Where I brought in IASIS into this previous practices and this practice is that even in spite of trying to dial all of those things in, people were still struggling. There was an inertia that they were unable to overcome to sometimes even implement some of these things. And so what I found is that when you use the IASIS to bring down the inflammation, to help with the anxiety. They were able to overcome that inertia to action, and then really start to
Implement the
embrace
program.
and implement the program. And so that was one of the major things. And then folks that were still lagging behind, if we addressed their oral health, we've addressed all these other things. They have neuroinflammation, or they have these rumination loops that they can't get out of, that are really driving their autonomic nervous system dysfunction, that we found this to be very beneficial. And so, yes, I totally agree that this is a powerful tool, but it's not the only tool that's necessary in order to optimize somebody's health
Right.
and well-being.
But it's an adjunct that we have here that can help improve your overall health and wellness. And so we're glad that Jason Gorlish has brought this new modality into our practice. And everything that we do or add on is always trying to help those individuals who don't seem really to get well on the program. There may be some other things going on that we've overlooked, and there's some other modalities of treatment that we need to do that are natural. This is a natural treatment. We're not using pharmaceutical drugs. So it's exciting to have this on now. This treatment would last. How long does it last when you get a treatment, and how often should a person get this IASIS treatment?
So the actual treatment session is fairly brief. It can last up to about 45 minutes. There's usually an initial evaluation that's 90 minutes. That includes a treatment in and of itself. A typical treatment session can last up to 45 minutes. And really, most of the treatment session is preparation of the face and the scalp for the placement of the electrodes. So there's a little bit of scrubbing involved. There's a conductive electrical paste that's applied so that the electrodes get the information that they need. And so that during that session, the therapist will move those electrodes to different parts of the face and the scalp that correlate with or correspond to different areas of the brain that are being treated. And so there's a variety of different programs that can be run with a variety of different energy levels and time that can be. So the therapy is really tailored to each individual person. In between sessions, people will get a self-evaluation form that helps the therapist decide on what the next session of therapy is going to look like. And so typically, during the first part of treatment, it's done twice a week, ideally. And then the duration of therapy, the number of therapy sessions that you would need, is really contingent upon the severity of your issue, how sensitive you are to different things, because people who are very sensitive and haven't developed resilience may need a more gentle approach to therapy. And if they require a more gentle approach to therapy, it typically requires more therapy
Right.
to get the benefit they're looking for. And we're not trying to make lifelong patients or clients. So once you're starting to develop benefit, and typically it's seen within the first 5 to 6 sessions that you'll see benefits. So some people see from the very first session an incredible calm that comes over them. We have a patient who's he called it chasing normalcy. He would use marijuana to self-medicate his anxiety, and so he didn't get high when he used marijuana. He just felt normal, like a normal person would, and in his estimation anyways. And so after his first IASIS therapy, he kind of looked at me, he says, that was like smoking a joint. And because it didn't make him high, it just made him feel calm and normal. And so it can vary, like any therapy. We tailor the therapy for each person. And so if you have a significantly severe and long-standing process, then you may need 40 sessions. If it's a relative new insult and you're otherwise, maybe 10 to 20 sessions, which in contrast to conventional neurofeedback, the active form of neurofeedback, you may typically need 40 sessions as a standard just a rule of thumb for any issue that you're dealing with.
Well, for those of you that have found this interesting and want to do more research, I recommend go to DuckDuckGo online, and you can look up IASIS, IASIS, and read more in depth about it. I don't know if we have anything. Have we got anything on our website yet?
I think that may still be in the works.
Yeah,
but
we'll have something on. We're just bringing this on board in the last several weeks, but I wanted to let you know that this is another modality, neurofeedback, that can help you overcome some underlying disorders you may have, emotional disorders, whether it's depression or anxiety or panic attacks, or just feeling, low or fatigued, and you need to come in and be fully evaluated. But this may be a helpful adjunct to get you on a path of health and wellness naturally, which is our goal for you. So you have energy, vitality, and enthusiasm for life. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Sure,
Thanks
my
for this
pleasure.
very informative discussion today. God bless you. Thank each one of you for joining us.
At Physicians Preference Pharmacy, we understand that the quality of your compounded medications directly affects the way you feel, which is why we believe that your pharmacy should specialize in compounding medications while also delivering extraordinary hospitality and guest service. We believe that both patients and prescribers should accept nothing less than consistency and quality from their compounding pharmacy. This is why we've implemented some of the strictest quality standards in compounding, exceeding standard requirements, achieving PCAB accreditation, which is the Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board, an organization that sets the highest standards in compounding pharmacy regarding the safety, cleanliness, and quality of your compounded prescriptions. Because of our commitment to complete health and wellness, we are dedicated to making your medications free of lactose, parabens, artificial sweeteners, and any unnecessary dyes, binders, or fillers present in many other medications, offering you the cleanest products possible.
Information provided on this program is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice and is not intended to replace the services of a physician, nor does it constitute a doctor-patient relationship. You should not use information from this radio program to diagnose or treat a health problem or disease without consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have or suspect you have an urgent medical problem, promptly contact a professional healthcare provider or call 911. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution advises you to always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider prior to starting any new treatment or with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Any application of the recommendations from this program is at the listener's discretion.